Classmates, class has started. Today we are going to learn about the slider component. The slider component is a sliding bar component. It displays a movable slider that makes inputting values more user-friendly and detailed. It is mainly used to control volume, time length, screen brightness, and so on. Now let's take a look at its main properties. The main properties of the slider component are as follows. Min represents the minimum value with a default of 0. Max represents the maximum value with a default of 100. Step represents the step size with a default of 1. Note that the step size must be greater than 0 and divisible by the result of subtracting max from min. Disabled indicates whether it is disabled. Value represents the current value. The following attributes such as active color, background color, block size, and block color mainly adjust the style of the slider component. They refer to the colors of the line on the left side of the slider, the line on the right side of the slider, the size of the slider block, and the color of the slider block. The attribute show value indicates whether to display the current value with a default of not displaying. For the slider component, there are two event handling attributes: change and changing. We usually handle that change attribute, which is triggered after completing a drag. The changing attribute is rarely used and is triggered during the dragging process. The value can be obtained from event detail value, which represents the current position value of the slider. Now let's see an example. This is the first slider component. Its default position value is set to 50. As you can see, it is in the middle. The step size is 5. Everyone can take a look while dragging how much the slider moves each time it is dragged. The sliding value is 5. Did you notice that? When dragging this slider component, the following slider component also moves along. Why is that? It's because every time the slider is dragged, the slider component executes that slider change method when dragging. You see, in the slider change method, the value of E detail value changes. Each time it changes, the value is a multiple of 5. This is because sometimes dragging may not be very accurate, and the step size is 5. This value is equal to E detail value, which obtains the current position value of the slider and assigns it to the value variable. The value attribute of that following slider component is bound to the value variable, so they will change accordingly. This is the step attribute and the change attribute of the slider. Take a look again. It displays the current value. It uses that show value attribute. You can see that it is displayed. Of course, this show value attribute is placed here, and the current value will also be displayed later. This will also change the value of the slider component and affect other slider components. It also uses the slider change method. Then, this represents setting the maximum and minimum values. The minimum value is set to 50. As you can see, it is the default minimum value. The maximum value ranges from 0 to 100. Now let's take a look at this. The minimum value is 50, and the maximum value is 200. The default value is 100. And now let's see how to control the color and size of the slider component. The active color attribute represents the color of the already slid portion. This one represents the color of the portion that hasn't been slid. This one represents the color of the slider block. This one represents the size of the slider block. Again, we obtain the value in the slider change method. In the slider change method, this value is equal to E detail value. This value keeps changing, and the position of the slider block will also change accordingly. This will also change accordingly. That's all for today's lesson on the slider component. By learning about the slider component, we can not only enhance the user-friendliness and functionality of our applications, but also improve the overall quality and competitiveness of our products. That's all for today's class. Thank you, everyone.